The azure skies of Nerine stretched endlessly above crystal spires that reached toward the heavens like fingers of hope. For 1,000 years, the Nerini had built their civilization on principles of harmony, scientific pursuit, and artistic expression. Their world was a jewel in the galactic community, known for its breathtaking architecture and the gentle wisdom of its people. The Nerini themselves were tall, slender beings with iridescent skin that shimmered in the light of their binary suns, their 4 eyes capable of perceiving spectrums of light and beauty that most species could only imagine. They had achieved what many civilizations only dreamed of: peace that lasted generations, technological advancement without environmental destruction, and a society where every voice was valued. Their ships were works of art, designed for exploration and diplomacy rather than combat. The Nerini believed so deeply in peace that their defense systems had grown obsolete, relegated to museums as relics of a less enlightened past. But the universe is rarely kind to those who are unprepared. The Krell Dominion arrived without warning one ordinary morning. Their ships blotted out the suns like a spreading stain across the perfect sky, massive and angular, bristling with weapons that spoke of a culture built around conquest. The Krell, with their thick gray exoskeletons and compound eyes that gleamed with cold calculation, had been expanding their territory for decades, consuming resources and subjugating species across 3 sectors of the galaxy. To them, Nerine was simply the next target, rich in resources, strategically located, and defenseless. The first bombardment shattered the crystal spires of the capital city. Millions of voices cried out in terror as structures that had stood for centuries collapsed in seconds. The Nerini peacekeepers, little more than a ceremonial force, were obliterated in the opening salvos. Civilian ships attempting to flee were shot down without hesitation, their wreckage raining back onto the surface like tears from the sky. In the underground chambers of the Council of Elders, First Speaker Thalia watched in horror as reports flooded in from across the planet. Cities burning, defense systems failing, millions dead in the first hours. The Krell had established beachheads on 3 continents and were deploying ground forces to secure resources and subjugate survivors. "We cannot stand against this," said Councillor Varen, his voice breaking. "We have no weapons that can penetrate their shields. Our people are being slaughtered." "The neighboring systems?" asked Thalia, though she already knew the answer. "The Stellari have gone silent. The Jopari are mobilizing but are days away at best. The consortium has refused our request, citing their non-intervention protocols." Thalia closed all 4 of her eyes briefly, gathering her courage. "Then we have only one option left. The protocol our ancestors established for this very scenario, one we hoped would never be needed." The elders fell silent, understanding immediately. The Nerini had long monitored the communications of a distant world, a planet whose inhabitants were known throughout the galaxy as dangerous, unpredictable, and incredibly resilient. A species that had evolved on a death world of extreme conditions, predators, and constant conflict. Humans. "They are violent," Councillor Marin whispered, voicing what they all knew. "Their history is written in blood. Their entertainment glorifies combat. They are death worlders who find joy in competition and conflict. And they may be our only hope," Thalia replied firmly. "The Krell will show no mercy. At least with humans, there is a chance." With trembling hands, she activated the ancient emergency protocol. A signal began broadcasting on all frequencies, coded specifically to be detected by human communication systems. The message was simple yet desperate. "To the people of Earth, our civilization faces extinction. The Krell Dominion has begun systematic extermination of our people. We have no defenses remaining. We offer trade, knowledge, and alliance in exchange for your help. Please respond. This is our final hope." The signal shot outward through subspace, racing toward a blue-green planet that most Nerini had only seen in historical records, a world that, despite its relative technological infancy compared to other galactic powers, had produced beings of such fierce determination that many advanced species gave their territory wide berth. 3 days passed as the Krell tightened their grip on Nareen. Cities were secured, resources cataloged, and surviving Narini herded into processing centers. The methodical efficiency of the conquest was terrifying. The Krell operated like a hive mind, each soldier understanding their role in the greater mission with unwavering clarity. On the 4th day, as hope began to fade, Philia received word that a response had come through on the emergency channel. With the remaining council members gathered around, she played the message. A human face appeared on the screen, female by their species standards, with dark skin, sharp eyes, and hair pulled back tightly. She wore a uniform adorned with insignia that the Nariani translators identified as denoting high rank. "This is Captain Ilara Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet vessel Thermopylae. We have received your distress call and are mobilizing a response force. Transmit tactical data on enemy positions and capabilities. We are coming. Hold on." The message was short, direct, and lacked the diplomatic flourishes the Narini were accustomed to. But beneath the sparse words, Philia sensed something the Narini had almost forgotten existed: the cold fury of a predator species preparing for war. 12 light-years away, aboard the EDF Thermopylae, Captain Ilara Hayes stood on the bridge, studying the holographic display of the Narini home system. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, preparing the massive warship for combat. The Thermopylae was the pride of humanity's fleet, a kilometer-long behemoth of advanced alloys and cutting-edge weapon systems that represented the culmination of humanity's rapid technological advancement since first contact 50 years prior. "Tactical assessment?" Hayes asked, her voice carrying the calm authority that had made her one of the youngest captains in the fleet. Commander Jackson Chen, her executive officer, gestured at the display. "The Krell have deployed approximately 30 warships around the planet, primarily Ravager-class destroyers and Subjugator-class cruisers. They've established orbital defense platforms and have ground forces securing major population centers. Conservative estimate puts their total force at roughly 100,000 troops. And our response package: the Thermopylae, plus the Sparta, Marathon, and Actium from Battle Group 7. The carrier Normandy with its fighter wings is also being diverted to rendezvous with us. Total combat strength of 5 capital ships, 12 support vessels, and approximately 200 strike craft." Hayes nodded, her expression unchanging. Outgunned and outnumbered. Typical. A ghost of a smile crossed Chen's face. "Just the way we like it, Captain." Hayes turned to Communications Officer Dias. "Send word to Fleet Command that we're proceeding with the intervention. Then contact the Nariani leadership. Tell them we'll arrive within 72 hours and to prepare any remaining forces they have for coordinated action." "Yes, Captain." Hayes then faced the assembled bridge crew, her dark eyes scanning each face. "The Narini are a peaceful species who lack the natural advantages we evolved with. They've built a civilization that, by all accounts, represents the best of what sentient life can achieve. And now they face extinction because they chose creation over destruction." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We did not ask to become the warriors of this galaxy. Earth was not a gentle mother. She forged us through fire and blood, through climate extremes and predators, and our own savage history. But that crucible made us strong. It made us survivors." Hayes pointed to the image of Nareen, its beautiful blue expanse now marred by the scars of Krell bombardment. "Today, we use that strength not just for ourselves, but for those who cannot fight as we do. The Krell believe they have found easy prey. They are about to learn what happens when you hunt in humanity's territory." A rumble of approval went through the bridge crew. Not cheers. They were too professional for that, but the focused energy of predators preparing for the hunt. Navigation. Plot jump coordinates. Weapons. Begin tactical simulations based on the Narini data. Medical. Prepare for casualties, both human and Narini. Engineering. I want every ounce of power those engines can give us." The crew dispersed to their stations, moving with purpose and precision. Hayes returned her attention to the tactical display, studying the Krell formations. The enemy had the advantage of numbers and position, but they had never faced humans before. They didn't understand what they were about to encounter. "Commander Chen, what do you know about the Battle of Thermopylae?" Hayes asked quietly. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Ancient Earth history. A small force of Greeks held off a vastly larger Persian army at a narrow mountain pass. They used the terrain to negate the enemy's numerical advantage," Hayes said, nodding. "The Krell have us outnumbered, but they're concentrated around a single planet, focused on occupation rather than defense. They're not expecting an attack. You have a plan." Hayes smiled, and there was nothing gentle in the expression. "The Krell think they're conquerors. It's time they learned they're just bullies, and humanity has never tolerated bullies." 24 hours later, Battle Group 7 entered hyperspace, their engines pushing to maximum velocity. In the darkness between stars, 5 warships carrying the hopes of a dying civilization and the fury of humanity hurtled toward a confrontation that would change the galaxy's understanding of the species from Earth. In her quarters, Hayes reviewed the final tactical plans. The Krell were organized, methodical, and ruthless. But they were also predictable. They followed the same conquest pattern on every world, never deviating because they had never needed to. Their technological superiority had made innovation unnecessary. Humanity, by contrast, had risen to the stars on the back of desperate innovation. Faced with resources far more advanced species took for granted, humans had developed unconventional strategies, asymmetric warfare tactics, and a knack for turning disadvantages into strengths. As the fleet streaked through hyperspace, Hayes sent a final message to the Narini resistance fighters, who still held out in hidden bunkers across their world. "We are coming, and we are bringing with us humanity's oldest gift, the ability to defy impossible odds." The Krell command vessel Inevitable Dominion hung in high orbit above Narine, its massive silhouette casting a shadow over the conquered territories below. Warlord Drax stood before the tactical display, his compound eyes reflecting the blinking lights of subjugated cities. 3 weeks of systematic conquest had proceeded exactly according to protocol. Resistance had crumbled within days, and resource extraction was ahead of schedule. "Status report," Drax demanded, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. 87% of the planet secured. Warlord responded, his second-in-command. "Mining operations established in all major resource deposits. Processing of the local population is proceeding at optimal efficiency. And the remaining resistance, scattered and disorganized. They pose no threat to our operations." Drax's exoskeleton vibrated with pleasure. The Krell Dominion had conquered 17 systems in the past decade, each victory adding to their resources and slaves. The Narini were particularly valuable, intelligent enough for complex labor, but philosophically opposed to violence, making them ideal servants once properly processed. "The Council desires a full subjugation report by the next lunar cycle," Drax said. "Accelerate the processing centers in sectors." "Warlord," interrupted the sensor officer, his posture suddenly rigid with alarm. "Multiple hyperspace ruptures detected at the system edge." Drax turned sharply. "Identify." "Unknown configuration. 5 large vessels and numerous smaller craft. They're not matching any known signature in our database." "Display." The tactical screen shifted to show 5 ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Unlike the elegant organic curves of most galactic vessels, these were angular, utilitarian, bristling with what were unmistakably weapon emplacements. Even to Drax's experienced eye, they looked dangerous, like apex predators entering new hunting grounds. "Open communications," Drax ordered. Protocol demanded offering surrender terms to any interfering forces before elimination. It was more efficient than immediate combat. Before the communications officer could comply, The lead vessel broadcast on all frequencies, the message playing automatically through the bridge speakers. Attention Krell forces. This is Captain Elara Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are engaged in the unlawful conquest of a peaceful civilization and the slaughter of its people. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces from the Narini system. You have 10 minutes to begin evacuation procedures. There will be no further warnings. Silence fell over the Krell bridge. Then, slowly, Drax began to laugh, a chittering sound that his officers hesitantly joined. Earth? The Death World primitives. They'd barely have interstellar capability. He turned to his tactical officer. How many vessels do we have in system? 32 combat-ready ships, Warlord, plus the orbital platforms, against 5 vessels. Drax's mandibles clicked dismissively. Destroy them. Make it an example for any other would-be interferers. Aboard the Thermopylae, Hayes watched the Krell formation with clinical detachment. Their response was exactly as intelligence had predicted. The enemy ships were breaking from orbit, forming into a standard attack wedge. The Krell relied on overwhelming force and numerical superiority, tactics that had served them well against unprepared opponents. No response to our hail, Captain, reported Communications Officer Dias. I didn't expect one. Hayes replied calmly. Combat stations. Execute Operation Thunderbolt. Throughout the battle group, klaxons sounded as crews rushed to their positions. Inside the massive hangar bays of the carrier Normandy, pilots sprinted to their fighters. On the destroyers Sparta, Marathon, and Actium, weapons systems powered up, energy signatures suddenly spiking. Commander Chen approached Hayes, speaking quietly. The Krell are advancing in standard attack formation. They're expecting a direct confrontation. Then let's disappoint them, Hayes replied with a cold smile. Launch all strike craft. Initiate electronic warfare suite. Deploy Nemesis packages. Across the void, 200 fighters and bombers erupted from the Normandy's launch bays, forming up with practiced precision. But instead of charging toward the enemy fleet, they split into dozens of smaller groups, each taking different vectors. Simultaneously, from the underslung bays of the Thermopylae, hundreds of small, uncrewed objects were released, each barely larger than a human torso. They accelerated rapidly, their stealth systems activating as they disappeared from conventional sensors. On the Krell flagship, alarms began blaring. Warlord, we're detecting multiple electronic intrusions across all systems, reported the communications officer frantically. Our networks are being flooded with foreign code. Drax snarled in frustration. Isolate and purge. Maintain formation. We can't isolate it. It's adapting faster than our countermeasures. Across the Krell fleet, ship systems began failing in cascades. Communications channels filled with static. Targeting systems displayed phantom readings. Navigation computers calculated impossible vectors. This was humanity's first surprise, electronic warfare beyond anything the Krell had encountered. While many species focused on developing bigger weapons and stronger shields, humans had never forgotten that information was its own battlefield. The enemy vessels are experiencing system failures, reported the Thermopylae's tactical officer with satisfaction. Their formation is breaking. Phase 2, ordered Hayes. All ships, execute jump. In a maneuver that defied conventional space combat doctrine, the 5 human warships suddenly engaged their hyperspace engines, disappearing from normal space only to reappear seconds later, directly behind the disorganized Krell fleet. All ships, weapons free, Hayes commanded, her voice deadly calm. Prioritize targets according to protocol. The human warships opened fire simultaneously, their main batteries unleashing devastation upon the unprepared rear of the Krell formation. Unlike traditional energy weapons that most galactic civilizations employed, the human vessels fired projectiles. Kinetic kill vehicles accelerated to incredible velocities, carrying payloads designed to pierce the most advanced shields. The first salvo tore through 6 Krell destroyers, transforming them into expanding clouds of debris. Before the Krell could reorient, the human fighters swarmed through their formation, each squadron targeting specific systems, engines, weapons, communications arrays, with surgical precision. Meanwhile, the Nemesis packages, autonomous drone weapons, reached their destinations and attached to the hulls of the larger Krell vessels. They began drilling through the outer armor, deploying their payloads directly into critical systems. On the inevitable Dominion, chaos reigned. Drax watched in disbelief as his carefully orchestrated fleet disintegrated under the human assault. "Impossible," he hissed. "They're primitives. How are they breaching our shields?" "They're not using conventional energy weapons," his science officer responded, frantically analyzing the data. "They're using kinetic projectiles with biological components. The shields aren't calibrated for." The ship shuddered violently as something impacted the hull. "Report," Drax demanded. "Multiple breaches. Something is boring through the outer armor. Deploy internal security teams." But it was too late. Throughout the flagship, the Nemesis packages completed their work, releasing their secondary payloads, swarms of microscopic nanites programmed to disable rather than destroy, targeting control systems and power distribution networks. Within minutes, the mighty inevitable Dominion drifted powerless, its weapons silent, its engines dead. Across the battlefield, the remaining Krell vessels faced a similar fate. Those that attempted to flee were picked off by the human strike craft. Those that stood and fought found their superior firepower negated by the humans' unconventional tactics. In 27 minutes, the battle that should have been a simple extermination of interfering primitives had turned into the worst defeat in Krell military history. Across the battlefield, the remaining Krell vessels faced a similar fate. Those that attempted to flee were picked off by the human strike craft. Those that stood and fought found their superior firepower negated by the humans' unconventional tactics. In 27 minutes, the battle that should have been a simple extermination of interfering primitives had turned into the worst defeat in Krell military history. "Enemy fleet neutralized, Captain," reported Commander Chen, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. "The Sparta reports minor damage to its port shield generators. The Marathon lost 2 fighters. Otherwise, all ships reporting ready status." Hayes nodded, studying the tactical display where the remnants of the Krell fleet drifted helplessly. "Begin recovery operations for our strike craft. Prepare boarding teams for the Krell command vessel. I want their leader and their database. And the ground forces, Captain. Patch me through to the Narini resistance." Moments later, the holographic image of First Speaker Thalia appeared on the bridge. Her 4 eyes widened at the sight of Hayes. "Captain, the Krell fleet has been neutralized," Hayes finished for her. "But there are still enemy forces on your planet. Can your people identify the locations of all major Krell ground installations?" "Yes, we have been monitoring them from our hidden facilities." "Transmit those coordinates to us immediately. Then have your people take shelter. The next part may be loud." Within the hour, precision strikes from orbit had eliminated the Krell command centers across Nareen. Without leadership and with their communications severed, the ground forces fell into disarray. The few that attempted to use the Narini as hostages found themselves facing specially trained human strike teams who had deployed silently from orbit, soldiers who moved with a lethal efficiency that seemed impossible for their size. By dawn of the next day, the Krell invasion force had surrendered or been eliminated. The processing centers were liberated, the captive Narini freed. The nightmare that had descended upon their world had been lifted as suddenly as it had arrived. In the crystal dome of the partially restored council chamber, Captain Hayes stood before the assembled Narini leaders, her uniform immaculate despite the days of combat operations. Behind her stood Commander Chen and a small honor guard of human officers. First Speaker Thalia approached, extending her 4 arms in a traditional gesture of profound gratitude. "Captain Hayes, there are no words in our language to adequately express what your people have done for ours. You came when no one else would. You risked your lives for a species you had never met." Hayes nodded respectfully. The strong have a duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is a principle my people learned through bitter experience. The galaxy views humans as dangerous, said Counselor Varen, stepping forward. They speak of your world as a place of violence and conflict, your people as unpredictable and aggressive, but they do not understand. What do they not understand? Asked Hayes. That what makes a species dangerous can also make them the greatest protectors, Philia replied. Your people evolved in conditions that required strength, cunning, and yes, the capacity for violence. But you have channeled those qualities into a shield for those who cannot fight. Hayes smiled slightly. We were not always so noble. Earth's history is stained with blood spilled for less worthy causes. But we learned, eventually, to direct our strength outward, against those who would prey upon the vulnerable. The Krell believed themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, said Philia. They never considered that a greater predator might exist. Not predators, Hayes corrected gently. Guardians. Earth has joined the galactic community relatively recently, but we've observed a troubling pattern. Species like the Krell operate unchecked, conquering and enslaving with impunity. The established powers talk of peace but stand aside when violence erupts. She looked around at the assembled Narini, her expression resolute. Humanity has decided to offer an alternative. We are establishing what we call the Sentinel Alliance, a mutual defense pact. Any peaceful civilization that wishes to join will receive our protection. In return, we ask only for friendship and the open exchange of knowledge and culture. A murmur went through the council chamber as the implications became clear. You would defend us against any future threat? Asked Counselor Marin, disbelief evident in her voice. We would, confirmed Hayes. And not just you. Any peaceful species that wishes to focus on creation rather than destruction deserves the freedom to do so. Philia stepped forward, her iridescent skin glowing with emotion. The Narini would be honored to be the first to join this alliance. Our scientists, artists, and healers will share all we know with humanity. Hayes extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement, which Philia carefully mirrored with one of her 4 hands. This day marks the beginning of something new in the galaxy, Hayes said. The Krell and others like them believe that strength comes only from conquest. We will show them that the greatest strength comes from standing together. As word spread throughout the galaxy of how a handful of human ships had decimated a Krell invasion fleet, how the frightening Deathworlders had come not as conquerors but as protectors, perceptions began to shift. Species that had viewed humanity with fear and suspicion now saw them in a new light. The Sentinel Alliance grew rapidly, as dozens and then hundreds of peaceful civilizations sought the protection of the fierce humans. And throughout the galaxy, would-be conquerors began to think twice before targeting seemingly defenseless worlds, for they never knew when they might hear the dreaded alert. Human vessels detected in the system. For the first time in millennia, the balance of power had shifted. No longer would peaceful species be forced to choose between developing weapons or facing extinction. They had found their guardians in the most unexpected of places, a death world called Earth, whose inhabitants had turned the crucible of their violent evolution into a shield for all who desired peace. The galaxy would never be the same again.